I would love to talk to you about the Pam Bondi of all this, because obviously she was the Attorney General 2011 to 2019 in Florida. So she would have inherited the files on Jeffrey Epstein, who, as we know, there was both the local police and the FBI had massive amounts of information about him. He went to jail for on one charge of underage solicitation of prostitution in 2008. It was a sweetheart deal, as we all know. She would have picked up the papers then. What was her role? Because he continued this behavior in Florida, in Palm Beach, as well as his houses elsewhere, right under her nose.
Right. Well, there wasn't a lot of information, to be frank. There wasn't a lot of information about his sexual predation until Bondi became AG. He was sent to prison in 2008 before she became Attorney General. But by the time she became Attorney General in 2011, a lot of civil lawsuits had been filed. And in the course of all those lawsuits and depositions and discovery, they found that there were a lot more victims, and that this was an ongoing network of predation involving other people. Virginia Giuffre, who was the most vocal victim, filed an affidavit, I believe, in 2015, saying that she was trafficked to some very prominent people, including Prince Andrew.
Right.
And that was a court document. So,
Julie, just sorry, but you're right. This is a complicated story. Did she file that in Florida?
Yes.
So Pam Bondi would have been aware of that.
Well, yes, she had to be aware of it because it was written about extensively, especially by the British media, but the American media covered it as well because Alan Dershowitz also came into the picture, and then he started suing her lawyers. So there was coverage of it back then. And as I said, it was such a high-profile case, at least during that period of time. One would think she would have looked at it. Now, it's possible she did, and she decided not to do anything. I'm not saying she didn't look at it. What I'm saying is that part of it did become public under her tenure.
So what do you think happens now?
Well, what do I think happens or what do I think should happen? I mean, those are two different questions.
Well, yeah, very good point. I mean, what do you think may happen now? And then what do you think should happen now?
Well, I think they're going to move her out of the prison that she's in Florida. I'm sure that there's some concern, or at least on her part, of her safety, because she's she's really in the news right now, and she believes that Epstein was murdered. His brother believes he was murdered. Whether you agree with that or not, I'm sure she has some safety concerns. So they might move her, especially maybe to a place that's a little bit more conducive to Washington, maybe closer to Washington, where they're going to be, I guess, having more talks with her. It's hard to say whether they're going to offer her some kind of deal. And my guess is they're going to try to find something, because this story isn't going away for Trump. So my guess is they're going to try to figure out some way to have her make public a statement of some sort that Trump wasn't involved.
So do you think that Ghislaine Maxwell is at risk? Do you think her life is at risk in the current jail she's in Tallahassee? And we know Florida jails are difficult places, and you've had a lifetime of reporting on Florida jails.
Well, what I was going to say is prisons and jails are just dangerous places, period. And it is so easy to cover up a crime in jail. The cameras are broken, guards fall asleep. I mean, they are, for the most part, very corrupt. And so, it's possible, but she wouldn't necessarily be safe anywhere. Look at Epstein. He was with probably one of the most high profile prisoners that we've ever had, and he still was managed to be found dead. So anything's possible.
And I know you're not a conspiracy theorist, but you haven't you can't quite figure out how he died. Do you want to talk us through that?
Well, there's just too many problems with the story that they're using to justify the suicide. I'm not saying he didn't commit suicide. I'm just saying that there are too many holes in the whole story. And, I can go through the litany of problems, but for the most part, they haven't answered why the cameras weren't working. Why is it that he was able to have 2 mattresses and all the blankets and the material that he had in there? Why wasn't the scene secured after his death that should have been treated as a suspicious death from the get-go? He was pretty much dead when they got there, but they removed his body and they, God knows what they did with the crime scene. His brother firmly believes that this was a situation where Epstein had a lot of information on a lot of powerful people, and that it's possible that the death didn't happen. They took out his cellmate, for example, right before this happened, and he was on suicide watch. Allegedly, you're supposed to have someone in there. I mean, there are all these protocols that were broken. So I think that, the autopsy itself hasn't been released. So all these things lead to people coming up with conspiracy theories. I mean, I spoke with one victim last week who thinks he's still alive.
Okay, well, that does seem to be pushing it. There was a picture of him dead, actually, on the on the front page of the New York Post. But you make the point that the video they released actually wasn't the video of his cell door.
No. And for them to kind of try to imply that it is, and this is evidence, is absurd. Because it's the wing where his cell was, that camera was not recording in real time. So they have no video from that. And these were various wings, and none of the cameras in that whole unit were working except for the one that they showed us, which doesn't really show anything. So, it's like I said, there are so many things like this that don't make any sense.
Although you can imagine that if you're Jeffrey Epstein, you're in there for a second child. I mean, the photos of him from jail make him look really rough. I don't find it difficult to imagine that you would want to commit suicide in that situation.
He was doing exactly what he did in Florida, though. He wasn't spending a lot of time in that cell during the day. He was doing same pattern. He would hire all these lawyers. He would go out in the morning and he would go into an office with his lawyers and he would stay there for almost all day. And then he would just go back to his cell to sleep. He was using his lawyers so that he could get out of jail, so to speak, and just be able to be in a comfortable environment where he was allegedly speaking to his lawyers. He was setting up things that he had done in Florida in order to make his jail time a little bit more comfortable.
But he also knew he was guilty.
I don't think so. I think he always thought he was above the law, and in his mind, he was trying to help these girls by, in some cases, he did. He helped one of the victims become, an actress, and he did pay for some schooling for others. He fancied himself as this intellectual father figure, giving them advice. He always thought of himself as above the law. I don't think he ever really thought he did anything wrong.
But he must have known that his behavior was completely abnormal. Did he not have an understanding of that? Was he so sociopathic that he literally thought he was above the law and anything
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's what I think. He really was. And it is possible that he could still, two things can be correct at the same time. It's possible that he didn't believe he did anything wrong, but still could see that he was in a jail, and that the publicity at the time surrounding the story would make it very hard for him to get out. So two things could be correct there.
So if he were killed in jail, who is like, I mean, I take it, I understand that jails are difficult and dangerous places, and they're often very badly run and they're corrupt, as you say. How would you murder someone in jail?
Well, you have a lot of people in jail who have no hope of getting out. And because in general, when I have covered deaths that happen in prison, it often involves other inmates that you make promises to, whether it's a financial incentive or even, I know of deaths that have happened just because they got some cartons of cigarettes. I mean, they're in there and they're not getting out, number one, so they have nothing to lose. And the other thing to remember is that pedophiles are on the lowest of the low in any jail. They do not last long in jail because they have a target on their backs. So, I'm not saying that he was killed, but I'm saying that there are a lot of questions. There's no evidence that authorities even questioned all the inmates that were on that wing.
Join me in applauding our producers, Devin Rogerino and Anna von Ursen, and our editor, Jessie Millwood.